My name is Lydia Wonget. I am doing a video for the DMIS course I'm following at this time, and this is for competency 1, contextual engagement 2. This competency 1 requires that we search, we survey and organize pertinent sources. So in doing that, step 1 required that I should just read and review literature, which I have been doing. I read Lawrence, Machi, and Brenda M. Nevoy. And then the second step was so that I could conduct an initial search and begin to add to my resources at this point in time. And I've been adding in more resources. I keep reviewing and going. I've been step 3. I've been taking notes as I read pertinent things that I discovered that are important to the project. I include those things there. The project actually that I am talking about is an ecosystem that reveals the state of children's ministry in AGA. AGA is Africa Assemblies of God Alliance, and the ministry's strategic involvement in God's mission. So like I was saying, step 4 needed that I should be reading both for data and positioning of sources in my project. Then the step 5 is to continuously organize these sources into different stages. For example, I organize them as the problem that I'm looking at, the need that is there, the gap, and then the opportunities that are there, and what is Assemblies of God saying in this season. So in organizing that, I looked at resources that were looking at the problem. The problem here is the fact that Assemblies of God has existed in Africa for almost 100 years. We know this because several nations have celebrated their 100-year anniversary. And while existing for this 100 years, out of the 54 nations in Africa, only 24 are actively doing something in ministry to children. And then 10 other countries, we haven't been able to get any information from them. And 16 other nations, we don't know precisely what they are actually doing as far as work with children is concerned. So this evaluation would help us. It is a problem to us because we really want to know what is happening. The research that In Common did, In Common went in and discovered when they made their research that only 60% of churches saw a 10% growth in their children's ministry. That actually is a problem. And then 56 of these churches say that their biggest need is to train their staff and people who volunteer to work in children's ministry. So 56% of these people have not been trained. 51% of the churches say that their biggest need is better curriculum for these children, and 32 of these nations need this curriculum in their native languages. The material should be in their native tongue so that they can be able to leverage it. And 44% of the churches have their biggest need is better knowledge of children and youth. What are the practices that are needed in children's ministry? And so we saw these things as problems that could be looked into and evaluated, researched on and evaluated, and then to get to a place where we can include ministry to children in this. And so we read books like The Rise and Fall of Movements. Since this AG is a spiritual organization that is gradually being transformed into a movement, I read this book and found there that there is actually the need of AG transforming into a movement and then being able to actually organize ministry with children differently. I read a book like Kinnaman David's book that said, "You lost me. Why young Christians are leaving the church." Young Christians abandon the church because the adults don't understand them. They don't implement the kind of understanding that they would want. I read books like Christian Smith that says, handing down the faith, how parents pass their religion on to the next generation. And then Lawrence Mell also talked about the dynamics of spiritual formation, that these children, the problem we have is how do we get to passing down the spiritual formation to our children. And Johnson Suzanne is telling us how spiritual formation is very important at that tender age. Haystack is talking to us about teaching the children about God. How do we teach them in a way that they themselves can pick it up and begin to run with it? And others like Melia, Kevin, are talking about rethinking children not as property, but as a family that needs to transcend spiritual things. So still in some places in Africa, we look at children as property. They are just there, they can't say anything, and so we look at them in that light, and then we do not want to include them in the work. So all of that is a problem. So at that, what actually is our need? The need that Africa has at this time is the fact that someone like Lois Lebar in Children in the Bible School, and how of Christian education, she comes out and brings out the idea of qualified Bible teachers, that where there are no qualified teachers, we can never have a qualified children's ministry, or children that really have communities that stick to the Lord, that reflect the character of God, because the person passing down the information doesn't also have what it takes. And so we have Susan Johnson again, who talks on Christian spiritual formation, which is very, very important. In her book, she highlights the ongoing shaping process of in children. So that makes us see the need in children's ministry, that the children need to grasp this word and then carry it and walk alone. So the leader of the future, new visions, strategies and practices for the next era by Francis Hesselben. This book also is a great need. It tells us that there is a great need in Africa to be able to bring the children to a place where the practices of this next era, we can bring out visions and strategies that can build these children and transit them to the next place. We have wars in Africa, so there is a need of healing the children of war, and that is Phyllis Kilbom. She explains to us how these traumatized children can be able to come to a place of healing and hold on to Jesus Christ. We see Barbara Ann in spiritual formation, personal formation and educational practices, where she lines out how children can be followed up in a very systematic way, and they will be helped to go on. So the problem of the need, I had 14 sources. The need, I had 15 sources. And then the gap that is existing. What is it actually that produces a gap between the problem and what we are already doing today? We have Richard Rimmold in The Crooks, How Leaders Become Strategists. The gap is, how do we strategize to take the children from where they are and bring them closer to the adults, so that there will be a specific transition, so that the children can transition, so that the adults can transition faith to the children and help them. And then again in Zaire, Midday in Missions, we read her Donald McGravan, who took time to look at what the missionaries did in DRC Congo. At that time, children were brought to missionary schools, so that the parents actually came and said, teach our children about Jesus. And when they were to be taught about Jesus, these missionary agencies rather were fighting each other and did not bring these children to a place of knowing the Lord. So that gap existed. The gap that children in whatever sphere in life, whatever thing they are practicing, is it in school, is it at work, they are still serving God. But there is this gap where we have the thought that it is only the pastor or pulpit that is called to do the Lord's work. So there we had 11 sources, and then there are opportunities where we had 14 different sources where we can, why Africans fail to lead, contemporary thoughts on African leadership by Ensign Luesia. He actually explained why leaders cannot lead in Africa, and what if they do to children in Africa, they will grow up and being capable of leading in contemporary times. Those are opportunities. Christopher Wright, in The Mission of God's People, a biblical theology of the church and mission, also tells us how we can at the same time put children in the place where they can enter into understanding their mission in life and following that mission. So those become opportunities. But then AG in itself has 6 write-ups for a solution. AG is advocating the desire that children should understand and grasp their faith. The children should be included in the development, in discipleship, in planting of churches. So the objectives, they have strategic objectives that they have brought out that children need to be included. They desire a spirit-empowered church in Africa. So there are write-ups on that from AG, which are included in this work. They want to craft a dynamic path for evangelism that will also include children at this point and stage in our lives. So all these resources would help this project and would help us evaluate it, and will help place us in a place where we can understand what to do and how to find opportunities for children to grasp and grow in all of it. Thank you.